The priest's voice echoed through the packed church as he asked the question that would normally seal my fate. "Do you, Margaret, take Mark to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I stood there in my ivory dress, feeling every eye in that sanctuary burning into me like laser beams. Without missing a beat, I grabbed the microphone from Father Johnson's hand and said, "Actually, I have something to share with everyone first." What happened next changed absolutely everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Now, let me take you back to where this whole mess began. Because, honey, you need the full picture to understand just how spectacular this disaster really was. 6 months earlier, I was wandering through the Meridian Art Gallery downtown on a Saturday afternoon, feeling sorry for myself as usual. 63 years old, widowed for 15 years, and spending another weekend alone, trying to appreciate art that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas. That's when I heard his voice. "Excuse me, but you have exquisite taste." I turned around to find this silver-haired man in an expensive suit, probably late 40s, with eyes the color of aged whiskey, distinguished, confident, the kind of man who belonged in galleries and fancy restaurants. "Well, that's debatable," I replied, studying his face. "I was just thinking this Jackson Pollock looks like my kitchen after I tried to make spaghetti sauce." He laughed, one of those rich, genuine laughs that makes you feel like you're the most interesting person in the room. "I'm Mark Patterson," he said, extending a manicured hand. "Margaret Coleman." We talked for over an hour about art, about loss, about the strange way life keeps moving forward even when your heart feels permanently parked in the past. He told me he was a widower too, no children, just trying to find meaning again after losing his wife to cancer 2 years prior. "The hardest part isn't the grief," he said as we walked toward the gallery exit. "It's the loneliness, learning to live for yourself again instead of as half of a couple." God, he was good. Every word perfectly calibrated to hit me right in the feelings. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" he asked. His voice just the right amount of hopeful and hesitant. I should have said no. Should have remembered that men like Mark don't just materialize in art galleries with perfect timing and perfect words. But standing there, feeling more alive than I had in years, I heard myself say, "I'd like that very much." 3 weeks later, we were having dinner every night. He'd show up at my door with flowers, wine, and stories about his day in investment consulting. 2 months later, he was staying over most weekends, making me breakfast and telling me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever known. "You make me feel young again," he'd whisper, holding me close in my kitchen while coffee brewed. 4 months later, he got down on one knee in my garden, between the roses Robert had planted for our 20th anniversary. "Margaret," he said, holding a ring that probably cost more than my car. "I know we haven't known each other long, but at our age, why waste time pretending we have forever? I want to spend whatever years I have left making you happy." The ring was perfect. The moment was perfect. He was perfect. And I said yes, because apparently even at 63, you can still be an absolute sucker for a beautiful fairy tale. "We should have a proper wedding," Mark insisted as he slipped the diamond onto my finger. "You deserve to be celebrated, to walk down that aisle like the queen you are." 6 months to plan the wedding of my dreams. 6 months of believing I'd found my second chance at happiness. If only I'd known that Prince Charming was actually the big bad wolf in a very expensive suit. But standing at that altar, finally knowing the truth about Mark Patterson, I realized something important. This story wasn't going to end with me being eaten alive. It was going to end with me being the one doing the hunting. The morning after Mark proposed, I called Daniel with the news. "You're getting married?" My son's voice shot up so high only dogs could hear it. "Mom, that's incredible. When do I get to meet him properly?" "This weekend. I'm cooking Sunday dinner for all of you." Saturday evening arrived with Mark bearing expensive wine and his most charming smile. Daniel and Lana showed up with flowers and barely contained curiosity about my mysterious new fiancé. I watched from the kitchen as Mark worked his magic on my family. He had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room, a skill I was only beginning to appreciate. "So, Mark, what do you do?" Daniel asked, settling into the living room with his beer. "Investment consulting," Mark replied smoothly. "I help people like your mother manage their portfolios, protect their assets. The wealthy need guidance on how to make their money work for them." "Wealthy? Since when was I wealthy?" I had Robert's life insurance money and my teaching pension, but I wasn't exactly swimming in diamonds. That's perfect, Lana chimed in, leaning forward with interest. Margaret definitely needs someone looking out for her finances. There was something in the way she said it that made me grip my serving spoon a little tighter, like I was some helpless old woman who couldn't balance a checkbook. I've managed my money just fine for 15 years, I called from the kitchen. Of course you have, sweetheart, Mark replied. But wouldn't it be nice to have professional help? During dinner, I started noticing things, little things that probably meant nothing, but felt like everything. The way Lana kept glancing at Mark when she thought no one was looking. How Mark's hand lingered just a second too long when he passed her the salt. The way they both seemed to find each other amusing in a way that excluded the rest of us. So, when's the big day? Lana asked, cutting into her steak with more force than necessary. October 15th, I said. Nothing too elaborate. Nonsense, Mark interjected, reaching over to squeeze my hand. A woman like Margaret deserves the wedding of her dreams. Big church, beautiful reception, the works. Daniel raised his glass. To new beginnings and second chances. We all toasted, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slightly off-key about the whole evening. Maybe it was the way Mark kept checking his phone under the table, or how Lana seemed more interested in studying my fiancé than celebrating with me. After Daniel and Lana left, Mark helped me clean up. Your family is wonderful, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind as I rinsed dishes. They are. Daniel's a good man, and Lana seems protective of him. She is, sometimes a little too protective, if you ask me. Nothing wrong with looking out for family. That night, Mark's phone buzzed constantly with text messages, one after another, like popcorn popping. Popular guy, I observed. Client emergency, he explained, silencing the phone. Some people get anxious about their portfolios after hours. On a Sunday night? Money never sleeps, darling. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into wedding planning with an enthusiasm that surprised me. 300 guests, live band, flowers everywhere. Mark insisted on paying for most of it, which should have been romantic, but somehow made me uncomfortable. I can afford my own wedding, I told him one afternoon as we tasted cakes. I know you can, sweetheart, but I want to do this for you. Let me spoil you the way you deserve. Meanwhile, Lana started showing up at my house more often, always with some excuse, helping with wedding plans, bringing me magazines, checking if I needed anything. Where's Mark today? She'd ask, looking around my house like she expected him to emerge from a closet. Business meeting, I'd reply, watching her face carefully. He works so hard. You're lucky to have found someone so dedicated. The way she said dedicated made something cold crawl up my spine. One evening, she arrived just as Mark was leaving for one of his mysterious client dinners. Oh, she said, her cheeks flushing pink. I didn't know you were here. Just picking up some documents, Mark replied. But there was something in the way they looked at each other that made my stomach twist. Have a lovely evening, Lana said, watching him walk to his car with an expression I couldn't quite read. That night, I stood in my kitchen drinking wine and staring at my engagement ring. The diamond caught the overhead light, throwing tiny rainbows across the white cabinets, and all I could think was how something so beautiful shouldn't feel so complicated. But love was supposed to be complicated at my age, right? Second chances don't come with instruction manuals. I was probably just overthinking everything. Wedding stress, they called it. Perfectly normal for a woman planning her second marriage at 63. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. 3 weeks before the wedding, the strange little signs started adding up to something I couldn't ignore. It began with phone calls. Mark's phone would ring at the oddest times, during dinner, at midnight, early Sunday mornings when we were still in bed. He'd always step outside to answer, returning with vague explanations about overseas clients or emergency consultations. The investment world never sleeps, he'd say, kissing my forehead. But after we're married, I'm scaling back. You'll have my undivided attention. Right. Because nothing says romance like scheduling quality time between mysterious phone calls. Ladies, when your man's phone rings more than a telemarketer's during dinner hour, that's not success. That's suspicious. Then came the text messages. Mark's phone would buzz constantly, like an angry bee trapped in his pocket. He'd glance at the screen. His face would shift slightly. Then he'd slip the phone away without responding. Everything okay? I asked one morning over breakfast. Just spam, he said, but I'd seen him typing furiously under the table 2 minutes later. The real alarm bells started when I borrowed his phone to call AAA. My car had died in his driveway, and my phone was dead upstairs. As I dialed, a text popped up from someone listed as L. Missing you already. My heart stopped. Who's L? I asked when Mark came back with jumper cables. His face went pale for exactly 1 second before he laughed. Oh, that's Larry. That's my business partner. He gets sentimental after a few drinks. Larry. Of course, because business partners definitely text each other about missing each other. I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. Mark would disappear for hours on errands that should have taken 20 minutes. He'd come back with the wrong groceries or forget entirely what he'd supposedly gone out to buy. His stories about his dead wife kept changing. One day she'd died of cancer, the next it was a car accident, then suddenly it was a hiking accident in Colorado. Your wife was quite the adventurer, I commented one evening. What do you mean? Well, yesterday you said she died hiking in Colorado. Last week it was cancer. Mark's smile never wavered. Different wives, sweetheart. I was married twice before. I told you that. He hadn't told me that, but I let it slide, filling away another inconsistency in my growing mental file. Meanwhile, Lana became a constant presence. She'd show up unannounced with casseroles, offering to help with wedding preparations, asking detailed questions about Mark's schedule and whereabouts. Where's your handsome fiancé today? She'd ask, settling into my kitchen like she owned it. Client meeting in Atlanta, I'd reply, studying her face. He travels so much for work. Must be lonely for you. I'm used to being alone. Still, it's nice that you'll have someone to take care of you soon. There it was again, that tone suggesting I was some helpless old woman who needed caretaking. One evening, Daniel and Lana came over for dinner. Mark was late, claiming traffic from yet another emergency client consultation. When he finally arrived, Lana practically glowed. Mark, we were starting to worry, she said, jumping up to hug him. The hug lasted exactly 3 seconds too long. I timed it. Sorry, everyone. Crisis averted. Though, Mark said, his hand resting on Lana's lower back as she stepped away. Daniel was oblivious, pouring wine and talking about his latest project at the engineering firm. But I saw everything. The way Lana's breath caught when Mark touched her. How they stood just a little too close while she helped him hang up his jacket. The meaningful look they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. After dinner, I excused myself to get dessert from the kitchen and found them by the window, heads together, whispering. Everything all right? I asked loudly. They jumped apart like teenagers caught making out. Just asking Mark about that new restaurant downtown, Lana said quickly. Thought Daniel and I might try it. Wonderful recommendation, Mark added smoothly. You two would love the atmosphere. That night, after everyone left and Mark went home, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of wine, staring at my engagement ring and trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But the next morning, I found a conversation on Mark's phone that he'd forgotten to delete. Just a fragment before he came out of the shower, and I had to pretend I'd been looking for my reading glasses. Can't wait much longer, was all I caught before the screen locked. I deleted his browser history that showed he'd been looking at flights to Costa Rica, and I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for lunch at the Marriott downtown. The same day he'd told me he was in Atlanta. 3 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Ask him about Tampa. I stared at that message for 10 minutes before deleting it. But that evening, when Mark kissed me goodnight and told me how much he loved me, all I could think about was Tampa, Costa Rica, and Larry, who missed him already. The wedding was in 2.5 weeks, and I was starting to think I didn't know my fiancé at all. 2 weeks before my wedding, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Well, technically, I did my own investigating first. At 2 a.m., sitting in my kitchen with coffee and my laptop, I started digging into Mark Patterson's background with the determination of a woman who'd rather know the ugly truth than live a beautiful lie. Mark Patterson was surprisingly difficult to find online. No Facebook profile, no LinkedIn, no professional website for his investment consulting business. For someone who supposedly managed wealthy clients' portfolios, he had the digital footprint of a ghost. But I've been a high school librarian for 30 years. I know how to research. I found him in a Tampa Bay Times article from 3 years ago. Investment advisor vanishes after fraud allegations. There was his photo, looking younger and cockier, standing outside a Tampa courthouse. The article detailed how Mark Patterson had allegedly defrauded several elderly clients of their retirement savings before disappearing when authorities began investigating. My coffee went cold as I read about widows losing their life savings, forged documents, and phantom investment accounts that existed only on paper. Son of a bitch, I whispered to my empty kitchen. And here I thought finding a charming, available man at my age was a miracle. Turns out it was, just not the good kind of miracle. More like the congratulations, you've won the predator lottery kind. I kept digging. Court records showed a pattern spanning multiple states, marriage licenses in Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, all to women over 60. Divorce filings that mentioned irreconcilable differences and financial disputes. A bankruptcy filing under the name Martin Pierce. A restraining order from someone named Patricia Palmer. By sunrise, I had printed everything. The evidence was damning, but I needed to know about Lana. Was she a victim or an accomplice? That afternoon, I did something that felt completely insane. I followed her. Yes, you heard right. At 63, I'd become the kind of woman who conducts surveillance operations in hotel lobbies. Apparently, there's no age limit on learning new skills when your family's being destroyed by professionals. Lana left Daniel's office at lunch and drove straight to the Marriott downtown, the same hotel where Mark had apparently been having lunch instead of attending meetings in Atlanta. She went up to the 8th floor using a key card she pulled from her purse. I waited in the lobby for 2 hours. When she came down, her hair was messed up and her lipstick was gone. Mark came down 5 minutes later, adjusting his tie. My heart shattered and hardened at the same time. That evening, Mark came over with Thai takeout and flowers, acting like nothing had changed. "You seem quiet tonight," he observed, setting plates on the table. "Just tired. Wedding planning is exhausting. 2 weeks and we'll be on our honeymoon in Maui. Just you and me and the ocean." I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the loving fiancé while my mind raced through everything I'd discovered. "Mark, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." "Have you ever been to Tampa?" His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Tampa? Why do you ask?" "Just curious. Someone mentioned you might have worked there." "Must be mistaking me for someone else. I've never worked in Florida." Another lie to add to the pile. After dinner, while Mark showered, I finally did what I should have done weeks ago. I went through his phone systematically. The passcode was 1947, which was probably his real birth year, though I doubted even that was accurate. Men never change their passwords. They just add numbers that matter to them. What I found made my stomach turn. Months of intimate messages between Mark and Lana. Photos I didn't want to see. Detailed discussions about my daily routine, my financial situation, even my medication schedule. "She goes to bed early on weeknights," read one message from Lana. "Usually asleep by 10. Mark's response. "Perfect. Gives us more time." But the worst message was from just last week. 2 more weeks and we're home free. The old lady trusts me completely." Lana's reply. "I still feel guilty sometimes." Mark. "Don't. She's had 63 years of happiness. Now it's our turn." I screenshotted everything, then carefully deleted the evidence of my snooping. When Mark came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on my bed in my nightgown, looking appropriately sleepy and trusting. "Come here, beautiful," he said, reaching for me. I let him hold me, let him whisper sweet lies about our future together, let him think he'd successfully fooled another lonely widow. But inside, I was planning his complete and total destruction. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "Margaret, how are the wedding preparations going?" "Interesting question, Janet. I need some advice about protecting my assets." "From what?" "From a wolf in Prince Charming's clothing." That afternoon, I sat in Janet's office, spreading my printed evidence across her conference table like playing cards. "Good God, Margaret, this man is a career criminal." "I know. The question is, what do I do about it?" "Call off the wedding, report him to the police, protect yourself. Or," Janet studied my face carefully, "you have something else in mind. I want to make sure he never does this to another woman, and I want everyone who's been lying to me to face the consequences of their choices." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Mark Patterson expects a wedding in 12 days, and he's going to get exactly what he deserves." The wedding invitations had already gone out. 300 guests expecting to witness a beautiful late-in-life love story. They were going to get a story, all right, just not the one they came for. 11 days before my wedding, I made a decision that would have shocked my younger self. I was going to let Mark Patterson walk into his own trap. I woke up that morning with crystal clear purpose. Mark had already left for another one of his mysterious client meetings, leaving behind designer cologne and the lingering scent of deception. But I wasn't going to expose him yet. Not when I could wait and do maximum damage in front of maximum witnesses. I called Janet, my lawyer, first thing. I need you to prepare some documents, I told her, quietly. What kind of documents? The kind that protect every penny I own and ensure that certain people face the full consequences of their actions. Margaret, are you sure about this approach? You could just call off the wedding and let him disappear to target the next lonely widow? I don't think so. Janet sighed but agreed to prepare protective financial documents that wouldn't take effect until after the ceremony. Next, I called Father Johnson at the church. Margaret, dear, how can I help you? Father, I need to make some changes to the wedding ceremony. Nothing major, just want to add some personal remarks. Of course, love makes people want to speak from the heart. If only he knew what my heart was planning to say. That afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Lana showed up at my door looking nervous and guilty, carrying a box of cookies like a peace offering. I thought you might be stressed about the wedding, she said, settling into my living room. These are those lemon cookies you like. How thoughtful. I smiled sweetly while studying her face. Are you excited about the wedding? Of course. You deserve happiness. I do, don't I? After 15 years alone, I deserve a man who's honest, faithful, and genuinely loves me. She shifted uncomfortably. Mark does love you, does he? Because lately, I get the feeling there are things about Mark I don't know. Lana went pale. What do you mean? Oh, just little things. Phone calls at odd hours, mysterious meetings, that sort of thing. You haven't noticed anything strange, have you? No, she said quickly. Nothing strange at all. Good, because I'd hate to think someone close to me was keeping secrets. After she left, I spent the afternoon calling Mark's previous victims. I'd found contact information for 3 women in my research, and their stories were heartbreakingly similar. He was so smooth, Patricia from Tampa told me. Made me feel like a queen, right up until he disappeared with my life savings. Are you going to press charges? I asked. With what evidence? He's too smart to leave a trail. What if I told you I had evidence? Would you be willing to testify? The pause was long. You found proof? I found enough to bury him. By evening, I had commitments from 4 previous victims to travel to Georgia for Mark's very public downfall. Mark arrived that night with champagne and steaks, ready to celebrate being so close to his latest payday. 10 more days, he said, kissing my cheek. I can hardly wait to make you my wife. Our wedding will definitely be memorable, I replied. Over dinner, I played my part perfectly. The excited bride-to-be, hanging on his every word, asking about our honeymoon plans, our future together. I've been thinking about our finances after the wedding, I said casually. Should I add you to my accounts right away? His eyes lit up. Whatever makes you comfortable, sweetheart. I just want to take care of you. You're so good to me. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You're special, Margaret. One of a kind. The irony was lost on him, but I savored every bit of it. After dinner, we sat on my porch swing watching the sunset. Mark had his arm around me, playing the devoted fiancé, while probably calculating how much money he'd have access to in 10 days. I love you, he murmured into my hair. I love you too, I replied, thinking about the screenshots on my phone and the witnesses flying in from 3 states. That night, after Mark went home, I stood in my bathroom mirror and practiced my wedding day speech. The words that would expose him, reveal Lana's betrayal, and free me from this elaborate charade. 10 more days of pretending, 10 more days of letting him think he'd won. But on day 11, standing at that altar in front of 300 witnesses, I was going to give Mark Patterson and Lana Thompson the performance of their lifetimes. I tried on my wedding dress one more time, admiring how the ivory silk caught the light. Money well spent for what was going to be the most costly lesson Mark Patterson ever received. He thought he was marrying a naive widow with more money than sense. Instead, he was about to marry his own destruction, and I couldn't wait to see his face when he realized the difference. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. He's planning to access your accounts during the honeymoon. Be careful. I smiled and typed back, thank you, but I'm way ahead of him. 10 more days. I could hardly wait. The morning of my wedding, I woke up before dawn with a strange sense of calm. Today was the day Mark Patterson would learn that not every widow makes an easy target. I was in my robe having coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Can't sleep. Too excited to marry you today. See you at the altar, my love. See you there. I typed back, then immediately deleted the message thread. My hairdresser arrived at 8, chattering excitedly about what a beautiful day it was for a wedding. If only she knew what kind of beautiful day I had planned. You look radiant, she gushed as she pinned my hair into an elegant updo. Absolutely glowing. I feel energized, I replied, which was the understatement of the century. At 10 a.m., while she worked on my makeup, Mark called. Good morning, bride-to-be. How are you feeling? Perfect. How about you? Like the luckiest man alive. I'll see you at the church. Mark? Yes. Sweetheart? I have something special planned for today. Something you'll never forget. I can hardly wait. Neither could I. At 11, Daniel arrived to see how I was doing. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, and for a moment I felt sad about what I was going to put him through. But he deserved to know the truth about his wife. Any last-minute nerves? He asked. None whatsoever. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Dad would be so proud. You look beautiful, Mom. Your father would want me to be happy. And today, I'm going to be very happy indeed. At noon, exactly 3 hours before the ceremony, I made a discovery that sealed Mark's fate forever. I was reaching for my perfume when I knocked over his jacket, the one he'd left hanging in my closet. His phone fell out of the pocket, face up, showing a notification from L. I picked up the phone, and this time, I didn't even need to guess his passcode. The message was right there on the lock screen. Can't wait to celebrate tonight. The old fool has no idea what's coming. My hands shook as I opened the phone and scrolled through their recent messages. What I found was worse than anything I'd imagined. Not only were Mark and Lana planning to rob me blind, but they'd already transferred $50,000 from a joint account I'd stupidly opened last month. They had detailed plans for accessing my other accounts during our honeymoon, complete with forged documents and power of attorney papers. But the message that made my hands shake was from this morning. If she gets suspicious, we might have to speed up the timeline. Can't risk her changing her mind about the wedding. Lana's response. Don't worry, she's completely clueless. This afternoon she'll be married to you, and by tonight we'll be rich. I screenshotted everything, my hands steadier now that I knew the full scope of their betrayal. Then I called Janet. Margaret, aren't you supposed to be getting ready? Change of plans. I need you to freeze every account I have right now, and call Detective Martinez. I want Mark Patterson arrested the moment he sets foot outside that church. What happened? They've already stolen $50,000. I just found the evidence. By 1 o'clock, my money was protected, and law enforcement was in position. By 2 o'clock, I was dressed in my ivory silk gown, looking like a radiant bride while feeling like an avenging angel. The church was packed with 300 guests, all expecting to witness a beautiful late-in-life love story. They were about to get the show of their lives. Patricia, Linda, and 2 other victims sat in the back row, ready to provide testimony if needed. Detective Martinez waited outside with backup. Janet sat in the 3rd row with a folder full of evidence. At 3 o'clock, the wedding march began. I walked down that aisle alone. Daniel had offered to give me away, but I wanted to do this myself. Every step felt powerful, purposeful. Mark stood at the altar in his designer tuxedo, looking confident and handsome and completely unaware that his world was about to implode. Lana sat in the 2nd row, wearing a red dress that screamed homewrecker, checking her phone and smiling like she'd already won the lottery. Father Johnson smiled warmly as I reached the altar. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Margaret and Mark in holy matrimony. I barely heard the opening words. My focus was entirely on Mark's face, memorizing his confidence, his satisfaction, his complete belief that he'd successfully conned another lonely widow. The ceremony proceeded normally through the readings, the prayers, the exchange of rings. Mark's hands were steady as he slipped the wedding band onto my finger, his voice strong as he recited his vows about loving and cherishing me. If only he knew how much I was about to cherish this moment. Finally, Father Johnson reached the crucial question. Do you, Mark, take Margaret to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part? I do, Mark said, his voice carrying clearly through the church. Father Johnson turned to me. And do you, Margaret, Take Mark to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part. This was it, the moment I'd been planning all morning. I looked at Mark. I looked at Lana. I looked at the 300 faces staring at me expectantly. Then I stepped forward and took the microphone from Father Johnson's hand. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church's sound system, before I answer that question, there's something everyone here needs to know about my groom. The silence in that church was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet as 300 people held their breath, waiting to see what I would say next. Mark's confident smile faltered. "Margaret, what are you doing?" "I'm doing what I should have done this morning when I found these." I held up my phone, showing the text messages between him and Lana. "Would you like me to read some of them to our guests?" The church erupted. Gasps, whispers, the scraping of chairs as people leaned forward or stood up to get a better view. Lana shot to her feet like she'd been electrocuted, her face ghost white. "For example," I continued, my voice cutting through the noise, "here's one from this morning. Lana to Mark. Can't wait to celebrate tonight. The old fool has no idea what's coming." More gasps. Someone in the back actually shouted, "Oh my God!" Mark lunged for the phone, but Daniel stepped between us, his face thunderous with understanding. "And here's my personal favorite," I announced, scrolling to another message. "Mark to Lana. She's completely clueless. This afternoon she'll be married to me, and by tonight we'll be rich." The church exploded into chaos. People were standing, shouting, pointing. Several guests were already pulling out their phones to record. Mark's supposed friends were heading for the exits. "This is insane!" Mark shouted over the noise. "She's having some kind of breakdown." "Am I?" I asked, my voice deadly calm in the wireless microphone. "Then perhaps you can explain this bank statement showing $50,000 transferred from our joint account to an account in the Cayman Islands." I held up the printed evidence Janet had prepared. "Or these forged power of attorney documents giving you access to all my assets during our honeymoon?" Father Johnson was frantically trying to restore order, but nobody was listening. Half the congregation was taking pictures. The other half was arguing loudly about what they'd just witnessed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, my voice rising above the chaos, "I'd like you to meet Mark Patterson, also known as Martin Pierce, also known as Michael Palmer, wanted in 3 states for investment fraud, married at least 6 times, all to wealthy widows who mysteriously lost their life savings shortly after saying, 'I do.'" That's when Mark made his biggest mistake. Instead of trying to talk his way out of it, he ran. He pushed past Father Johnson, shoved through the front row of guests, and bolted for the side exit, which was exactly where Detective Martinez was waiting with handcuffs. "Mark Patterson, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." The church was in complete pandemonium now, but I felt perfectly calm. Lana was sobbing hysterically in the second row. Daniel was staring at his wife with absolute disgust and betrayal. The photographer was getting shots of everything. "Oh, and Lana," I called into the microphone, looking directly at my former daughter-in-law. "The FBI will want to speak with you about your role in this conspiracy. I hope that red dress was worth it." She tried to run too, but several male guests blocked her path. Smart woman that she was, she gave up and collapsed back into her seat, crying harder. Patricia stood up in the back row and started clapping. Then Linda joined her. Within seconds, half the church was applauding like I'd just given the performance of my life, which, in a way, I had. Detective Martinez appeared at my elbow. "Mrs. Coleman, we'll need your statement." "Of course, but first," I turned back to the congregation, many of whom were still applauding. "Thank you all for coming today. I know this wasn't the wedding you expected, but it's exactly the wedding I planned." More applause. Someone in the back actually cheered. "The reception is still on," I announced. "The food's already paid for, and frankly, I feel like celebrating. Who's hungry?" 2 hours later, I was holding court at my own wedding reception, still in my dress, surrounded by friends and family who couldn't stop talking about what they'd just witnessed. "That was the most dramatic thing I've ever seen," my sister Linda said, raising her champagne glass. "I'm so proud of you." "You should have seen his face when the handcuffs came out," Daniel said, shaking his head. "I can't believe I trusted him. I can't believe I trusted her. Mark was a professional. Honey, he fooled everyone. But you figured it out. Eventually. after they'd already stolen $50,000. Daniel winced. Will you get it back? Some of it. Janet's already working on asset recovery. But honestly, it was worth losing that money to see Mark Patterson in handcuffs. Patricia approached our table, beaming. Margaret, that was the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed. Thank you for giving him exactly what he deserved. Thank you for flying up here to support me. Having his previous victims in the audience made it even sweeter. What happens now? Now Mark goes to federal prison for a very long time. Lana faces conspiracy charges. And I start the next chapter of my life as a woman who knows exactly what she's capable of. That evening, after everyone went home, I sat in my kitchen still wearing my wedding dress, drinking wine, and scrolling through the dozens of messages on my phone. News of my altar revelation was already spreading on social media. Wedding day revenge was trending, but the message that mattered most was from Daniel. I'm sorry, Mom. Sorry I didn't see what was happening. Sorry I brought her into our family. And sorry you had to handle this alone. I typed back, I wasn't alone. I had 300 witnesses and the best son in the world backing me up. The next morning brought calls from reporters, FBI agents, and women across the country who'd seen my story online and wanted to share their own experiences with romance scammers. Mark Patterson had given me something valuable, even though he'd never intended to. Proof that I was stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. And that knowledge was worth way more than $50,000. The morning after my spectacular wedding day meltdown, I woke up in my own bed, still slightly hungover from champagne and righteousness, to find my phone buzzing with notifications. Apparently, someone had posted video of my altar revelation online, and it was going viral. Wedding Day Revenge had over 50,000 shares. My righteous takedown of Mark Patterson was being hailed as everything from empowering to savage to the revenge fantasy every woman needs to see. But the real calls started around 8 a.m. Mrs. Coleman, this is Agent Rodriguez with the FBI. We need to discuss Mr. Patterson's broader criminal enterprise. Broader criminal enterprise. That sounded ominous. How much broader are we talking? We've identified at least 12 other victims across 6 states, possibly more. Your evidence has been crucial in connecting multiple cases. What about Lana? She's cooperating fully, providing details about recruitment methods, target identification, financial transfers. Seems she wants to minimize her own charges. Of course she did. Lana always was smarter than she pretended to be. That afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Mark's previous victim, Patricia from Tampa, was standing on my doorstep with a bottle of wine and a huge smile. I had to come thank you in person, she said, settling into my living room. What you did yesterday was every victim's dream come true. How did you hear about it so fast? Honey, your wedding day takedown is all over Facebook. My sister in Oregon sent me the video this morning. We spent the afternoon comparing notes about Mark's methods. Patricia had lost her entire retirement account to his investment opportunities, then spent 3 years thinking she was too stupid and too ashamed to report it. I kept telling myself it was my fault for trusting him, she said, for being so desperate for companionship that I ignored the red flags. That's what predators count on, our shame and silence. But you didn't stay silent. Hell no. I got loud, and I'm planning to get louder. That evening, Daniel came by looking haggard and confused. Lana had been arrested that morning and was sitting in county jail waiting for a bail hearing. I keep thinking I should feel something, he said, slumping into my kitchen chair. Anger, sadness, betrayal. But mostly I just feel empty. That's normal, sweetie. Your whole world just got turned upside down. I trusted her. We've been married for 8 years, and I had no idea she was capable of something like this. Lana was manipulated too, in her own way. Mark knew exactly how to exploit her weaknesses. Are you defending her? I'm trying to understand her. She made terrible choices, but she was also a victim of his manipulation. She helped him steal from you. Yes, she did, and she'll face the consequences, but hating her won't help either of us heal. Friday brought more FBI interviews and the revelation that Mark's operation was even more extensive than anyone had realized. Agent Rodriguez arrived with a thick file and a grim expression. We've now identified 17 confirmed victims, he told me, spreading photos across my dining room table. Total losses exceeding $2 million. I studied the faces, women ranging from their 50s to their 80s, all looking hopeful and happy in what were obviously engagement or wedding photos. How many other Lanas were there? At least 4 that we can confirm. Local accomplices who helped identify targets and gather intelligence. How did they recruit them? Same way Mark recruited his victims. Charm, manipulation, promises of a better life. These women weren't criminal masterminds. They were lonely, financially struggling, and vulnerable to someone who made them feel special. That evening, I got a call that changed everything. Mrs. Coleman, this is Sarah Mitchell from the Phoenix Journal. I'd like to write a story about romance scams, using your case as the centerpiece. Would you be interested? What kind of story? Educational, helping other women recognize the warning signs and protect themselves. Your courage in exposing Mark could save other potential victims. When do we start? The interview took place over 3 days, during which Sarah asked tough questions about my judgment, my loneliness, my desperation for companionship. I answered honestly, even when it hurt my pride. What would you say to other women who might be targeted? Sarah asked. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember, men who genuinely love you don't need access to your bank accounts to prove it. Any regrets about how you handled the situation? Only that I didn't figure it out sooner, and that I put my family through such a public humiliation. But you stopped him from hurting other women. That's what I keep telling myself at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. The story ran the following Sunday. Front page above the fold. Local widow exposes romance scam network. Within hours, my phone was ringing with calls from women across the country sharing similar stories. Mrs. Coleman, I think the same thing happened to me in Charleston. I lost everything to someone just like Mark. Can you help me? I'm currently dating someone who fits your description. What should I do? By the end of the week, I'd spoken with 37 women in 15 states. Some had been victimized. Others had escaped before losing money. All had stories of manipulation and betrayal that sounded heartbreakingly familiar. That's when I realized Mark Patterson had given me something I'd never expected, a purpose bigger than my own hurt feelings. Saturday morning, I called Patricia in Tampa. How would you feel about starting a support group for romance scam victims? For any woman who's been targeted by predators. Educational meetings, resource sharing, advocacy work. I'm in. When do we start? How about next weekend? My living room, coffee, and righteous anger. What should we call ourselves? I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. The Widow Warriors. Perfect. How many women do you think will come? As many as need to know they're not alone anymore. By Sunday evening, I had 12 confirmed attendees for our first meeting. Women who'd lost money, women who'd escaped in time, women who wanted to make sure it never happened to anyone else. Mark Patterson had tried to destroy me, but instead, he'd created his worst nightmare, a victim who refused to stay quiet, stay ashamed, or stay down, and I was just getting started. 2 weeks after my altar revelation, Mark Patterson tried to fight back. I was having coffee with Patricia, planning our first Widow Warriors meeting, when my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Margaret Coleman? Yes, this is David Brennan, attorney for Mark Patterson. My client would like to propose a settlement. I laughed so hard I nearly spit coffee across my kitchen table. A settlement for what? Your public statements have severely damaged Mr. Patterson's reputation and may have prejudiced potential jurors. We're prepared to offer compensation in exchange for a public retraction. Mr. Brennan, your client is a convicted felon who stole $50,000 from me. What exactly would I be retracting? The allegations of fraud are unproven. Mr. Patterson maintains his innocence. Then he can maintain it from federal prison. I hung up, but the call bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Mark was still trying to manipulate the situation, still believing he could charm or threaten his way out of consequences. That afternoon brought worse news. Agent Rodriguez called with an update on the federal case. Mark's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal, claims he can provide information about other romance scam networks in exchange for reduced charges. What kind of deal? 10 years instead of life. Eligible for parole in 7. Absolutely not. Mrs. Coleman, I understand your feelings, but if his information helps us catch other predators, then find another way. Mark Patterson destroyed 17 women's lives. He doesn't get to negotiate his way out of paying for it. That evening, Mark's direct assault began. Someone had posted my personal information online, my address, phone number, even my teaching history. The harassment started immediately. phone calls at all hours, fake food deliveries, strangers showing up at my door claiming to be journalists. Daniel came over after the third pizza delivery I hadn't ordered. "Mom, this is getting scary. Maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while. I'm not being driven out of my own home by a criminal in jail and his pathetic supporters. But what if someone dangerous shows up? Then I'll handle it the same way I handled Mark, by being smarter, stronger, and more prepared than they expect." Friday brought the most disturbing development yet. Lana, who'd been out on bail, showed up at my door looking desperate and hollow-eyed. "Margaret, please, I need to talk to you." Against my better judgment, I let her in. "I'm sorry," she said, collapsing into my living room chair. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant for it to go that far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" "I don't know. Mark said you were lonely, and he was keeping you company. He said wealthy widows needed someone to look out for them. And you believed him?" I wanted to believe him. He made me feel special, important, like I mattered. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but saw only exhaustion and regret. "Lana, you're 20 years younger than me and married to my son. If you believed Mark chose you for your sparkling personality instead of your access to our family, you're even more naive than I was. I know that now." "Do you? Because the FBI says you helped him identify other targets. That sounds less like being deceived and more like being an active participant." She started crying. "I didn't know he was married to other women. I thought I was special." "You thought wrong. Mark Patterson doesn't love anyone except money. You were a tool to him, nothing more. What's going to happen to me? That depends on how much you help the FBI catch other predators in his network. I've told them everything I know. Then you'll probably get a few years in minimum security instead of decades in federal prison. Count yourself lucky." After she left, I sat in my kitchen feeling oddly sad. Lana had made terrible choices, but she'd also been victimized by Mark's manipulation. The difference between us was that I'd figured out his game in time to fight back. Saturday brought the first Widow Warriors meeting. 12 women gathered in my living room, ranging in age from 52 to 78. Some had lost money to romance scams, others had escaped before being defrauded. All had stories of manipulation and betrayal. "The goal isn't revenge," I explained, opening the meeting. "It's prevention and support. We're going to make sure no other woman goes through what we experienced." "How do we do that?" asked Dorothy, a 70-year-old from Birmingham who'd lost her husband's military pension to a scammer. "Education, advocacy, and making noise. We're going to teach women to recognize the warning signs, trust their instincts, and never suffer in silence." Patricia had prepared a presentation about common scam tactics. Dorothy shared resources for financial protection. Linda from Jacksonville discussed legal options for victims. By the end of the evening, we had plans for community presentations, social media campaigns, and partnerships with local law enforcement agencies. "One more thing," I announced as the meeting wrapped up. "A journalist wants to write a book about romance scams using our stories. Everyone interested in participating?" Every hand went up. Sunday morning brought a call that made everything worthwhile. "Mrs. Coleman, this is Amanda from Seattle. I saw your story online. I think I'm being targeted by someone like Mark, and I want to know what to do." I grabbed a pen and notepad. "Tell me everything." Amanda's story was familiar. A charming man who'd appeared shortly after her husband's death, moving fast toward marriage and asking questions about her finances. "What should I do?" she asked. "First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Second, do a background check. Real name, criminal history, financial records. Third, never give anyone access to your money until they've proven themselves over time." "How much time?" "Years, not months. Love can wait. Your financial security can't be replaced." After I hung up, Patricia called with news. "I just got off the phone with a woman in Denver. She's been dating someone who matches Mark's description perfectly, even down to the dead wife story." "Same network?" "Has to be. I gave her your number." By noon, I'd received calls from 6 more women across 4 states, all reporting suspicious behavior from men who fit the romance scammer profile. The Widow Warriors weren't just supporting victims anymore. We were actively preventing new ones. That evening, I got one final call that changed my perspective completely. "Is this Margaret Coleman?" "Yes." "This is Detective Sarah Chen with Seattle PD. We arrested a man today for attempting to defraud an elderly woman. She said you told her to call us." "Amanda?" Yes, her quick thinking and your advice prevented her from losing over $100,000. I hung up feeling something I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Mark Patterson had tried to destroy my faith in love, my trust in people, and my financial security. Instead, he'd given me the most meaningful work of my life. 3 months after my wedding day revelation, I sat in a federal courthouse watching Mark Patterson's sentencing hearing. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened impassively as Mark's lawyer pleaded for mercy. Your Honor, my client deeply regrets his actions and has provided valuable cooperation to law enforcement. Judge Harrison wasn't buying it. Mr. Patterson, you systematically targeted vulnerable women, exploited their grief and loneliness, and stole their life savings. The court has reviewed testimony from 19 victims across 7 states, representing total losses exceeding $2.8 million. In the gallery behind me sat 8 of Mark's victims who'd flown in to witness his downfall. When the judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, I heard quiet sobs of relief. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, the court is recommending you serve your sentence in maximum security, given your history of escape attempts and continued efforts to manipulate the legal system. Mark's face went gray. He'd been counting on charm and cooperation to earn him minimum security and early parole. Instead, he was looking at dying in prison. Perfect. Lana received 3 years in minimum security 2 weeks later. Her cooperation with federal investigators had knocked 7 years off her potential sentence. Daniel attended her hearing but didn't speak to her afterward. It's over, Patricia whispered as we left the courthouse. No, I replied, linking arms with her. This is just the beginning. The Widow Warriors had grown from 12 founding members to over 200 women across 23 states. Our Facebook group had 15,000 followers. The book, Hearts Under Siege, Surviving Romance Scams, was being published by HarperCollins with proceeds funding victim advocacy programs. But the real victory was measured in prevention. Since Mark's arrest, our network had helped 47 women avoid becoming victims of romance scams. 47 women who kept their money, their dignity, and their faith in themselves. Mrs. Coleman? A young reporter approached as we descended the courthouse steps. Any final thoughts on Mark Patterson's sentence? Justice feels good, I replied. But prevention feels better. Mark Patterson will spend the rest of his life in prison, but there are hundreds more like him out there. Our job is to make sure women know how to protect themselves. What's next for the Widow Warriors? We're launching a national awareness campaign next month. Romance scammers rely on shame and silence. We're eliminating both. That evening, I hosted a celebration at my house. 28 widow warriors gathered in my backyard, sharing stories and planning our next initiatives. You know what I realized today? Said Betty, a 70-year-old from Jacksonville who'd lost her military pension to a scammer. We're not victims anymore. We're warriors. Damn right we are. I raised my wine glass. To the widow warriors, may we never be underestimated again. The toast was interrupted by my phone ringing. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Coleman, this is Rebecca Martinez from Phoenix. I saw your story online. I think someone's trying to scam my mother. I grabbed a pen and notepad. Rebecca's story was familiar. A charming man targeting her recently widowed mother, moving fast toward marriage and asking about finances. What should she do? Rebecca asked. First, tell her to trust her instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Second, run a complete background check. Third, never let anyone pressure her into financial decisions. After I hung up, Dorothy approached with a knowing smile. Another rescue? Another prevention. Rebecca's mother is going to do a full investigation before her next date. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a national conference on elder fraud. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of law enforcement officers, social workers, and advocacy groups, I felt the full weight of how much my life had changed. Romance scammers are predators, I told the audience. They target our loneliness, our hope, our desire for companionship. But they make one crucial mistake. They underestimate our strength. After my speech, a young FBI agent approached me. Mrs. Coleman, your network has been instrumental in preventing dozens of scams. We'd like to formalize a partnership between the Widow Warriors and federal law enforcement. What kind of partnership? Training? Resources? Direct communication channels? We want to make you our official eyes and ears in the community." That night, I called Patricia with the news. "We're going official," I told her. "Federal recognition, funding, the works. From wedding day disaster to federal partnership in less than a year. Not bad for a bunch of supposedly vulnerable widows." Mark Patterson taught us something important. We're only vulnerable if we choose to be. The next morning brought a call that reminded me why this work mattered. "Mrs. Coleman, this is Helen from Portland. I was about to wire $50,000 to a man I met online. But then I saw your story. I want to thank you for saving my life savings. Thank you for trusting your instincts and calling for help. What should I do now? Live your life on your own terms. And remember, the right person will love you for who you are, not what you own." As I hung up, I thought about Robert, my first husband. He'd been a good man who'd loved me genuinely, without agenda or manipulation. Mark's betrayal had made me question everything about love and trust. But the widow warriors had taught me something important. The problem wasn't my capacity for love, it was my willingness to ignore red flags in favor of romantic fantasy. Never again. That afternoon, I drove past the Meridian Art Gallery where I'd first met Mark. The same paintings hung on the walls, including that Jackson Pollock reproduction where our conversation had begun. A silver-haired gentleman was studying the painting, probably in his early 70s, well-dressed and distinguished. He turned as I approached. "Beautiful piece, don't you think?" "It's certainly chaotic," I replied carefully. "I'm James Morrison. I don't think we've met." "Margaret Coleman. And thank you, but I'm not interested." "I'm sorry?" "The art gallery pickup, the casual conversation leading to coffee." "I know exactly what you're doing, and it won't work." James Morrison looked genuinely confused. "I was just admiring the painting." "Sure you were. Have a nice day." I walked away, leaving him standing by the Jackson Pollock, probably wondering how his perfectly innocent comment had been misinterpreted. Outside the gallery, I called Dorothy. "Guess what just happened? Someone tried to pick you up in an art gallery." "How did you know?" "Because once you know how the game is played, you see it everywhere." That evening, I updated the Widow Warriors Facebook page with tips about staying vigilant in public spaces. Within an hour, it had dozens of comments from women sharing their own recent encounters with potential scammers. A year ago, I'd been a lonely widow, vulnerable to smooth-talking predators who saw me as an easy target. Today, I was Margaret Coleman, educator, advocate, and professional nightmare for romance scammers everywhere. Mark Patterson had tried to destroy me, but instead, he'd created his worst enemy, a victim who refused to stay quiet and had turned her pain into power. The war against romance scammers was far from over, but we were winning one battle at a time, and I was just getting started. 2 years after my spectacular wedding day meltdown, I stood in front of cameras at the FBI's Atlanta field office, announcing the arrest of a 7-person romance scam network that had stolen over $5 million from elderly victims across 12 states. The investigation began with information provided by the Widow Warriors Support Network, Agent Rodriguez explained to the reporters. Their vigilance and cooperation have been instrumental in protecting vulnerable adults from financial predators. In the 2 years since Mark's arrest, our little support group had evolved into a national organization with over 3,000 members. We'd helped prevent 247 confirmed romance scams, recovered $1.8 million for victims, and worked with law enforcement to prosecute dozens of criminals. But the real victory was personal. I transformed from a heartbroken widow into someone I actually liked and respected. After the press conference, Patricia and I drove to the federal prison where Mark was serving his sentence. Not to visit him, God knows I never wanted to see his face again, but to meet with other inmates' victims who were still struggling with shame and isolation. 2 years ago, I would never have imagined I'd be counseling people in a prison, Patricia said as we drove through the facility gates. 2 years ago, I was planning to marry a sociopath. Life has a weird sense of humor. The victim support meeting was held in a sterile conference room with 8 women ranging from their 40s to their 70s. All had been victimized by romance scammers. All were still processing the betrayal and financial devastation. "The hardest part isn't the money," said Carol, whose ex-fiancé had stolen her late husband's military benefits. "It's feeling like such a fool." "That's exactly what they count on," I replied. "Shame keeps victims silent, and silence protects predators. The moment you start talking about what happened, you take back your power. Easy for you to say. You got revenge. I got justice. But more importantly, I got purpose. My humiliation became my weapon. After the meeting, Patricia and I stopped for coffee. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just called off the wedding quietly? She asked. All the time. Mark would have disappeared, found another victim, and we'd never have connected all his previous crimes. Sometimes the dramatic choice is the right choice. Any regrets? Only that I didn't trust my instincts sooner. But I've learned that mistakes become wisdom if you're brave enough to share them. That evening, I attended Daniel's engagement party. He'd met Sarah, a nurse practitioner, 6 months earlier, and they were planning a small wedding next spring. She's nothing like Lana, Daniel told me, watching Sarah laugh with my sister across the room. Good. Lana was wrong for you in ways that had nothing to do with Mark. Do you think I can trust my judgment anymore? Your judgment was fine. You trusted your wife, which is what husbands should do. The problem was Lana's choices, not your faith in her. Sometimes I feel like I should have protected you better. Sweetie, you can't protect someone from their own decisions. I chose to trust Mark despite red flags. That's on me, not you. But you figured it out in time, barely. And only because I finally started listening to the voice in my head that kept saying something was wrong. The next morning brought a call that reminded me why this work mattered. Mrs. Coleman, this is Detective Williams from Miami. We've arrested a man trying to scam an elderly woman, and she says you taught her to recognize the warning signs. What happened? Classic romance scam setup, dead wife, investment opportunities, quick engagement. But when he started asking about her finances, she remembered your advice and called us instead. How much did she save? $200,000, her entire retirement fund. These calls came weekly now. Women who'd avoided becoming victims because they'd heard our message about trusting instincts, verifying identities, and protecting financial information. That afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Lana stood on my doorstep, looking older and more subdued than I remembered. What do you want? I asked, not inviting her in. To apologize, to try to explain. You can explain to your therapist. I have nothing to say to you. Margaret, please, I know you hate me, but I need you to understand something. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her enter. I was drowning, she said, settling into my living room. Marriage to Daniel was suffocating me. I felt invisible and unimportant, and Mark made me feel alive again. So you decided to help him steal from me? I never intended for it to go that far. He said you had more money than you could ever spend, that you'd never even notice. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. He made me feel special, chosen, like I mattered. Lana, you betrayed your husband and helped a criminal target his mother. You can't therapy your way out of that. I know. I've lost everything. My marriage, my reputation, my freedom. I deserved all of it. Yes, you did. But I want you to know that seeing you fight back, seeing you turn your pain into purpose, it inspired me. I'm working with a victim advocacy group now, trying to help other women avoid the mistakes I made. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but saw only exhaustion and genuine remorse. That's good, Lana. Helping others heal helps you heal too. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I've already forgiven you. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying anger around is exhausting. What about Daniel? That's between you and him. But if you're hoping for reconciliation, you're going to be disappointed. After she left, I sat in my garden thinking about forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. Mark was unforgivable because he'd never shown genuine remorse. Lana was pathetic, but redeemable because she was finally taking responsibility for her choices. That evening, I updated my journal, a practice I'd started after Mark's arrest to process everything that had happened. Year 2, postmark. Still single by choice, still angry about the $50,000 he stole, still proud of the strength I discovered. The widow warriors have become my chosen family, and helping other women has become my calling. I've learned that being alone doesn't mean being lonely, and that the right person will enhance your life rather than trying to control it. My phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy. Saw the news about the Miami arrest. Another win for the good guys. I smiled and typed back. Another reminder that knowledge is power, and sharing knowledge is a superpower. 3 years ago, I'd been a naive widow, vulnerable to predators who saw loneliness as opportunity. Today, I was Margaret Coleman, survivor, advocate, and professional pain in the ass to romance scammers everywhere. Mark Patterson had tried to destroy my faith in love and trust, but instead, he'd taught me something infinitely more valuable: the difference between being loved and being targeted. I was finally ready for love again, the real kind, with someone who chose me for who I am rather than what I own. And if that person never appeared, well, I'd learned that a life built on purpose and surrounded by chosen family was pretty damn good too. The war against romance scammers would continue, and I'd be on the front lines, making sure no other woman faced Mark's manipulation alone. Some fairy tales end with happily ever after. Mine ended with, and she lived powerfully ever after, protecting others from wolves in Prince Charming clothing. That was a much better ending anyway. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.